Attention all grill masters and backyard barbecue enthusiasts. Lynn's has everything you need to make your 4th of July cookout a success. From sizzling certified Angus beef steaks and mouth-watering burgers to fresh cut fruit and all the condiments you desire, we have you covered. Browse our weekly ad for celebratory savings like 39-cent per pound seedless watermelon through July 4th and shop online at lynsgrocery.com for extra convenience. Lynn's, where delicious begins.
The mighty and resilient Merrimack River, carving through the communities of our great region. My name is Linda Lorden, proud president of Merrimack County Savings Bank. And like the river that serves as our namesake, we're a constant yet ever-changing presence. Because to us, it's bigger than banking. It's about powering communities and putting people first. It's about knowing where you came from and where you're going. That's Merrimack style. Visit us at themerrimack.com.
You're listening to the Best Morning Routine Ever podcast, the show that proves no one stumbles upon success ever. With your host, Lou Need. Every Mondays and Thursdays, we deliver cold hard evidence behind the power of a robust morning routine. Get ready to be transformed by the renewal of your mind.
Hello, morning enthusiasts. Welcome to the Best Morning Routine Ever podcast. I am your host, Looney Lewis, and today I have the honor of introducing a very special guest to the show, Jonathan Joseph. He is the CEO and co-founder of Little Red Fashion, and it is the first fashion ed tech that publishes books that focuses on teaching kids about fashion and through fashion, which is pretty fascinating. So he is the author of the book, The Little Red Dress, and it's going to talk about fashion, the lessons kids can learn through that. And so I'm not gonna say much more about it. I'm gonna let him do the work because I'm excited to have him on the show. So with no further ado, Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hello, Lunid. Thank you so much for having me, and good morning to your audience. I am fresh off my morning routine, which is an essential part of my existence, especially as a creative and a writer, juggling the creative and business sides of things. So very glad we were able to talk. Thank you for the lovely introduction. The Little Red Dress is the first augmented reality children's book about fashion in history. So a number of the pages throughout the story of this simple red dress come to life through our augmented reality app and teach kids additional things. Yeah, like fashion history, how looms and dyes work, gets into sort of like the STEM field side of fashion. For me, I just think fashion is a lens that touches every facet of what we do and who we are. And it has been, to this point, underutilized as a resource to teach and connect with kids.
Yeah. And then to have kids focus on fashion and their appearance and how they look and how they show up, but you're also using the STEM aspect of it and getting the science and technology piece of it. Tell me, how did that begin? What is your background?
Well, I've had a very non-traditional, non-linear professional path. I've always been a sort of freelance consultant ever since college as an avid writer, and began doing professional document drafting and editing, grant writing, and things like that, which I spent most of college doing. And really, I learned that I love storytelling, whether it's telling a story for my clients as a consultant in terms of raising them funds or capital on the charitable side of things, whether it's telling a story like The Little Red Dress, or whether it's helping individuals and coaching individuals on helping tell their stories as well. And so as a narrative specialist, I have been blessed to be able to take sometimes complex things and boil them down and make them really relatable and accessible for people. And who's more important to make the world of information more accessible to than kids. And so The Little Red Dress was born out of some of the work I was doing in the fashion space as a strategic consultant in luxury women's wear in New York City. And it was born in a workshop, in a studio. I was bantering back and forth with the client during Fashion Week one year. And I said, there's this one dress that came back from a shoot, and it was a little bit tired, I guess we'll say. The dress she needed a little love. Sometimes models can be rough on clothes. So, I said, oh man, this dress has been through so many things, like in its simple life as a sample. And then eventually, samples get worn out and maybe they go to a sample sale, maybe they get gifted, maybe they go somewhere. And my client at the time and I were just talking back and forth about how many lives clothes have. And it dawned on me that using this idea of the stories that clothes hold and the lives that they they lead as the jump off point to teach kids how the industry works would be a really valuable thing because, I'm 36 years old and I never saw growing up as someone who loved fashion, books that met me on my level as a kid, but were still full of information, educational, and fun. And, usually when you liked fashion, when you were a kid and you're my age as a millennial, it was, you pick up Vogue at the grocery store, maybe you watch like FNL or Cindy Crawford on MTV, dating myself a little, but, that's all I saw. And I thought, that's not right. We give kids who love any other creative field, whether it's music, whether it's sports, whether it's drama, theater, dance. We don't hand them a violin when they're 15, 16 and say, go to Juilliard. We hand them a violin when they're 6, 7, 8 and say, practice, practice, practice. That's how you get to Carnegie Hall. And I realized that we don't do that with fashion. And fashion is one of the only creative disciplines we kind of wall off from kids in a formal educational sense until they're in like high school and they say, oh, I might want to go to Parsons or I might want to go to Central St. Martin or whatever it is. And I don't think that's fair. And I don't think that's right. And so Little Red Fashion was born out of the desire to fill that resource gap for kids and educators.
Yes, and that's great because they're two different worlds. You're fundraising for nonprofits, probably for big corporations, and you probably do case for support, right? And I know case for support is when you're utilizing data to make a story, to showcase or the graphs, make it look pretty, essentially, to raise more money, to get more funders in the door.
Oh, yes.
And you just flip that over to actually working with kids. And so that's really fascinating.
There's a lot of transferable skills, skills between the two. And I think people don't often really sit and think about, and if I had one piece of advice for anyone listening who's like on the fence or pivoting or thinking about switching things up, make a list, like a T-chart of the core skills you have in your current field and how they can translate into the field that you want to be in. And then find that entry position that'll get you in that space and go build from there.
Yeah, that's right on. And for you, has fashion always been a dream of yours from like peewee age?
Yes, absolutely. I often tell the story, and anyone who's listening who wants to read about it can go to the real THEREAL jjoseph.com. I wrote about this. My entree into fashion actually came really as a result of my ataxic cerebral palsy. So I was born with ataxic CP. And for those of you who are unaware, it is the rarest form of cerebral palsy that is caused just before or at birth due to lack of oxygen to the cerebellum in the brain, causing a lesion. For me, it messed mostly with my motor skills, depth perception, balance, and things like this. And so I'd like braces, AFO braces. Those in the disability community will be very familiar with AFO braces. And kids in the late 80s and 90s were not the kindest about the leg brace and eye patch and glasses kid. So definitely bullied, beat up, all that jazz a fair amount. And I wanted to turn this thing that was causing me so much frustration because of my peers into something that I could claim, something that I could own, something that I could be proud of in my own way. And so my mother had the bright idea to go and find me every color of like crazy, super long sock that you could find to like cover them, because this was back before now you can get AFO braces with like Marvel characters on them and like all sorts of cool stuff. I would have totally had Batman AFOs if they had that when I was a kid. Unfortunately, they didn't, but the bright side is it's what got me into fashion, going and sourcing all these different socks, running through the garment district in New York City with my mom, trying to find other people that had different colors or matching outfits to socks. If I found a pair of socks that I didn't have necessarily an outfit to go to, if I really like the color, I've always been very color driven. My mom would say, okay, we'll find an outfit. And she was a knitter. So she'd be like, oh, I can make a sweater that matches those socks or whatever it is. And it was that early experience of sourcing and hunting and finding and building outfits around something that was like almost like an armor for me to protect me from this bullying and harassment and all these things. And so that was my earliest experience with fashion that was empowering. And it just sort of went from there. It's always very like Matilda-esque as a kid in terms of just finding books, putting them in front of me. And so I was reading everything I could in the library about fashion and looking through old magazines and things like that. So that was really, to answer your question, yeah, it's always been a thing. Fashion has always been my love. it's funny, I didn't start consulting in it until later, until after I'd been consulting in, charitable operations, fundraising management, and advising startups in food service and other things. And so it was a long time coming, and now I am here.
Yeah, that's the thing with purpose, and it drives you. Like, you always come back to it. It's like home. Regardless of the journey that you take to get to it, it always feels like home. And thank you for sharing that. That is a sublime story. I really enjoy listening to that. So now you're doing the same thing, like with you finding the best ways to help kids with ADHD right now, right? So let's talk about that, because again, that purpose is still like expanding.
It's all encompassing, and it grows. It's like The Blob, that horror movie where the blob just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's how I feel with everything we're doing. As someone, I have ADHD. My co-founder has ADD and dyslexia. I'm very sensitive to the needs of neurodivergent kids. That's part of the reason I'm so passionate about augmented reality. Mm-hmm. If you look at the work that some of these big publishers are doing in AR, I didn't like it. We spoke to booksellers before diving down the AR path. And a lot of them are very frustrated because they felt like they were pushing these gimmicks, right? Where, Thomas the Tank Engine goes across your dining room table and Iron Man flies right. Who cares? Yeah. Ultimately, who cares, right? It's cool to have an entertaining gimmick, okay? But charging someone the cost of an AR enhanced book for a gimmick is ridiculous to me, especially in this economy. But more importantly, it's a waste. Augmented reality gives us the potential to take a story and all of the other tangential and interrelated resource information bits that are related to it can be shared with the audience without distracting from the story, and they can interact with those at their own pace. And especially for neurodivergent kids, especially for kids with ADHD, especially the hyperactive, who literally can't sit still, because that was me as a kid. You're able to take your phone and, let's say this is the book, it's a 3D object in space, and go around the runway and walk around and move. Being able to move and read and learn in that sort of freeform way is really important for neurodivergent kids. I've been having conversations like this with our colleagues at the organization Eye to Eye, for example, that works with learning differences between peer groups. So they have students that are in middle school who are paired with high school students that have similar learning differences, and they have a peer-to-peer mentorship program. And we're hopefully in 2023 going to be rolling out a really fun fashion-related project with them. I'm very proud of the work that I've already done with them, but we're always looking to improve, of course.
That is exciting. You have a lot of things brewing to make that happen. I like the mentorship aspect of it. So is that one way that you're helping those with learning differences make a difference in their own lives?
Absolutely. Absolutely. By making information democratized and accessible across a variety of formats, it is really important. In a few hours, I'll actually be recording our first episode for season 3 of our podcast, Little Red Village, where I'll be interviewing Fern Mallis, the creator of New York Fashion Week, former executive director of the CFDA, and really diving into that. We created the podcast because we felt it was very important in breaking down barriers to entry in the industry for all kids, not just those who are neurodivergent, but all kids, and hearing straight from the horse's mouth across a variety of career paths, how they got their start, why they did what they're doing, what advice they have to young people now for today's fashion world versus that of 30, 40, 50 years ago. The fashion landscape, even pre-COVID versus post-COVID, is so radically different. And part of my mission, part of my ethos, this idea that fashion is for everyone, means that we as a company aren't just offering books, aren't just offering a workbook, right? We have a 3rd grade reading and writing workbook that was vetted with our collaborative partners, Horizons, for literacy. We ran a pilot program this summer that was really fun with the 3rd through 6th graders. And out of that came our first 3rd grade workbook, which is really exciting. And we'll be building up more of those for 4th, 5th, 6th, etc., that focus on reading, writing, and literacy, and eventually STEM as well. So, making fashion-themed educational resources accessible was also important, because the fact is kids today have 5 billion things begging for their attention, and they are happy to be distracted by whatever it is. And the thing that really bothered me is that fashion is something a lot of these kids are very interested in, whether they're flipping Jordans or, or looking to, tie-dye their own clothes or spend 5 minutes on TikTok. Gen Z and Gen Alpha love fashion in a way that previous generations just don't or didn't as much. And they interact with it in a much more direct way where they're looking to learn how to sew. They're looking to learn how to embroider. They're looking to learn how to upcycle. And so meeting those needs is also very important, whether it's, again, through the podcast, through collaborations for content that we're going to be working on in 2023. And of course, our, main bread and butter, which is these augmented reality books. The Little Red Dress is the first of 12 that we're planning. We're also working on middle grade readers that are historical fiction that deal with a special time traveling mirror, but I'm not going to go too deeply into that or my board will yell at me and I don't want them to do that. However, it's very exciting and very fun. And it's a little bit Nancy Drew meets Doctor Who, but make it fashion.
Look at that. Look at that. So now I want to jump into your habits and principles. How do you get up, dress up and show up, right?
Sure, absolutely. As someone who's neurodivergent, routine is very important for me. The paradox of ADHD is that we need structure, but we are so natively bad at it because of our ADHD. And so for me, many years ago, after my mother passed away, I discovered Buddhism and meditation and mindfulness. And I have been a Buddhist since then. And I find starting off my morning with a daily constitutional, a walk. I call it my constitutional. I just think it sounds nice. Anytime I take a walk, I call it a constitutional. It's a phrase my mom would use when we would go and walk. So I keep that courage going. So I do my morning walk. I prepare my French press before I go out so that by the time I get back, my coffee is the exact temperature that I like to drink it at. And then I go about making my breakfast and starting my day. I am an early riser by nature. I was not always this way. Actually, I was definitely not a morning person for the majority of my 20s. And then somewhere around 28, 29, I just started, my body wouldn't sleep past a certain point. My body said, nope, you're going to be a morning person now. And I have, and ever since then, I have been. I just even with jet lag and things like that until my recent move to Los Angeles, I was bi-coastal going back and forth. And so jet lag was the thing. But even then, I wake up at 5 on the dot, regardless of what coast I'm on.
Where you are.
Yeah, my body just does it. So for me, I found that that's a nice sweet spot that is organic to my body. I'm very big on sort of being intuitive with my body. It's very common, I think, for people with ADHD to have a bit of a disconnect between mind and body because there's so much going on up here that it's hard to tune in here. And mindfulness and meditation are a big part of that. I consider my constitutional a form of walking meditation, which is something that Buddhist monks talk about quite a lot in various suttas, the benefits of that. And so I'm a big proponent of the morning walk. It also gives me time to have my coffee be exactly the temperature I like. So
that's important. That's right.
A morning French press my morning French press is a key part of the morning. If it's not coffee, it's tea. Just standard Persian tea. And other than that, my morning routine, I make breakfast and then I jump into my work day. I tend to break up my work day into 30 to 45 minute increments. And in between them, I stretch, I go walk around. I've been working from home since well before COVID. So I've gotten sort of into a flow on that front as well. And for me, I find that as a creative, it just gives me the space to hash out my tasks for the day in a way that is intuitive. Some days, it's harder than others. And some days you get distracted by something you weren't expecting. But having an overflow list where the things I don't get to just go on the overflow list, which is the top of the next morning's list. So there you go. That's another one of my productivity hacks. I'm a lister. Some people don't love lists. Yeah, I love lists. The thrill of putting the line through the thing when you're done. I love that feeling.
Yeah, it's a sense of accomplishment. You check something off, you get it done, and you can move on to the next.
Well, and especially for neurodivergent people with ADHD need that because we get a dopamine hit from that checking off. And by following the dopamine, which I encourage your listeners to Google, there's some great content creators on TikTok and Instagram that talk about following the dopamine. If you have ADHD, it's building in those little hacks to get that little dopamine hit that will keep ADHD people particularly focused and able to plow through a list of things rather than I did 2 or 3 things done. I can't do anymore. I'm burnt out or neurodivergently frazzled.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, no, I'm all about a list as well. It does just feel super rewarding. With your morning routine, I like that you're getting up and moving first thing in the morning, right? Giving you more energy, letting your body know that, it's time to get going. And the walking meditation, that's really good. So you're just kind of quiet, listening to something. How's your walking meditation?
It depends. Sometimes I'm in absolute silence. Often what I do is I have my noise canceling headphones, not these, and I won't have anything on, but I'll have the noise canceling feature on so I don't hear much of the outside. But if someone, like for safety reasons, I can still hear if someone like comes up behind me or something, because you never know. And for me, it's really important some days, if I'm feeling like I need a little more focus, I'll put on some mantras, something like that. For those of you listening, mantra, a little linguistic moment. I can't help it. This is the word nerd in me. But mantra comes from the Sanskrit word mun, or mind. And then tra is the verb form of trayate, which means to protect. So a mantra is a mind protector. The purpose of a mantra is to protect and train the mind. And so there's a couple that I use. One that I particularly love is the Medicine Buddha mantra. As someone with a disability, this sort of gently making friends with my body, as particularly my legs, every morning is very important to me. And it helps me just take care of myself. And on days, for example, where I know I'm going to be in a situation where I'm talking about current events or something, maybe I'll throw on a podcast. I'm a big podcast listener. So sometimes my constitutional involves, listening to one of my podcasts, whether it's 99% Invisible, The Economist, whatever it is. But most of the time, it's usually just some sort of instrumental music, like Eric Satie, big Eric Satie fan. So like usually some form of classical or romantic, or big Chopin fan. But it's usually not very like, that's not so much the vibe.
Yeah, very relaxing. I do like what you said. Mantra is to protect the mind. So thank you for sharing that. And sometimes we forget. We have to frame. We have to reprogram the mind, especially like the subconscious mind, because it's so easily frazzled and running off with you if you don't be intentional about it. So I appreciate that. The mantra is to protect the mind. Jonathan, tell us, where can we find the Little Red Dress? Where can we find you, connect with you?
Absolutely. So it's super easy to find me. You can find my personal Instagram at @TheRealJJoseph, which is also the URL for my personal website. And you can find out all about Little Red Fashion at littleredfashion.com, on Instagram at Little Red Fashion Co., or on TikTok at Fashion is for Everyone.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. It's been insightful. I appreciate your time today.
I appreciate you. I appreciate your audience. I'm very excited to hear from some of them. Feel free to reach out to me. And I had such a great time, Lunid. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
All right, morning enthusiasts, that's it for today's show. Thank you for tuning in. If you love the Best Morning Routine Ever podcast, we'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes or Google Play. While you're at it, tell a friend about the show. Be sure to visit bestmorningroutineever.com and our Facebook group to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our fantastic free bonus content. Until next time.
Okay, it's official. We are very much in the final sprint to Election Day. And face it, between debates, polling releases, even court appearances, it can feel exhausting, even impossible to keep up with. I'm Brad Milkey. I'm the host of Start Here, the daily podcast from ABC News. And every morning, my team and I get you caught up on the day's news in a quick, straightforward way that's easy to understand, with just enough context so you can listen, get it, and go on with your day. So, kickstart your morning. Start smart with Start Here and ABC News, because staying informed shouldn't feel overwhelming.